mechanic looked at me confused and said, "Ma'am, your son sold this car an hour ago. He had the keys." I stayed calm and replied, "Really? Then call the police, because the car is in MY name and I never signed anything." When my son showed up with the buyer, his face went white as the officer said, "Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin." Noise started as a faint, metallic whisper beneath me, a sound that had no business coming from a car that had never asked for anything but routine maintenance. I heard it 3 days ago on my way back from the grocery store. A soft, rhythmic tick-tick-tick that sped up with the wheels. It was the kind of sound most people might ignore until it became a shout. I am not most people. I scheduled an appointment with Frank for Tuesday morning. I believed in addressing problems while they were still whispers. That Tuesday, I sat in the plastic chair by the service desk at Frank's Honest Auto Repair. The air was warm and carried the dense, familiar smells of motor oil and concrete. Frank had taken my keys, given me a nod that was both greeting and promise, and driven the blue sedan into the first bay. I watched him lift it on the hoist. I sipped coffee from the paper cup I'd brought with me. I noted the calendar on the wall, still showing last month's picture. The clock above it ticked loudly. I listened to the distant sounds of tools and low radio chatter. It was a normal morning. Frank walked back into the office area, wiping his hands on a red rag. His expression was not one of mechanical puzzlement, but of profound social discomfort. He did not look at me directly at first. He moved to his computer, its screen reflected in his glasses. "So the noise," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "It's a wheel bearing starting to go. Not a huge job. We can have it done by this afternoon." I felt a minor relief. A wheel bearing was a thing that could be fixed. "That's fine, Frank. Thank you for getting it in so quick." He nodded, still focused on the computer monitor. His finger tapped on the mouse. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Johnson, Ella, there's something else." I placed my coffee cup on the floor beside my purse. "Something else with the car." "Not with the car itself." He finally turned to look at me. His face was arranged into lines of apology, as if he were about to deliver news of a death. "When I ran the VIN to order the part, the system, it flagged something. A transaction." I waited. I said nothing. "A transaction filed about an hour ago," he continued, each word pushed out with effort. "A title transfer for this vehicle." The sounds of the garage receded. The ticking of the clock became a dull thud in my ears. I kept my eyes on Frank's. "A title transfer to whom?" He swallowed. "To a Kyle Darnell. A private sale. The seller's name on the transfer is Marcus Johnson." The plastic of the chair felt suddenly cold through my slacks. The air in the room grew thick and difficult to pull into my lungs. I did not move. I did not gasp or cry out. 30 years as a school librarian had taught me how to receive shocking information with a stillness that calms a riot. I used that stillness now on myself. "Marcus sold my car," I stated. It was not a question. Frank's gaze dropped to his rag. "It looks that way, ma'am. He had the keys and the title. The system processed it. The new owner hasn't picked up the vehicle yet, but it's legally recorded as sold." I looked past him, through the grimy window of his office, at my car suspended in the air. The car Robert had helped me pick out. The car we had paid off together 2 years before he passed. The car that had taken me to work every day, to the library, to the hospital during his last weeks, to the cemetery afterwards. It was a machine, 4 tires and an engine. It was also the last tangible artifact of a life built on mutual decisions. It represented my ability to go where I needed, when I needed, without asking anyone for a ride. My independence was hanging from a lift in Bay 1. And my son had signed it away. A cold clarity washed over me, sharper and more bracing than any anger. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not one of his forgetful moments or his short-term financial panics that involved borrowing a 20 from my wallet. This was a calculated legal action. He had taken the physical title from my filing cabinet. He had taken my spare keys from the hook by the back door. He had brought them here to a man who knew him, who knew me, and he had lied. He had looked Frank in the eye and perpetrated a theft. "Did he say why?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign to me, flat and devoid of vibration. Frank shifted his weight. "He said you agreed to it. that you were upgrading and told him to handle the sale. He seemed normal, in a hurry, but normal. He looked truly pained. Ella, if I had any doubt, I never would have processed the paperwork. He's your son. I've known him since he was a boy. I did not agree to it, I said. Each word was precise, a stone placed on a table. I did not give him permission. The title is in my name alone. The registration in my glove box confirms that. The legal facts assembled themselves in my mind with the quiet click of a lock engaging. Ownership, proof, crime. Frank simply nodded, the weight of his unintended complicity pressing on his shoulders. What do you want to do? I looked at my hands resting in my lap. They were steady. I thought of Marcus's face, the charming smile he used like a tool to smooth over trouble. I thought of the exhaustion that had been creeping into my bones over the last few years, the exhaustion of worrying, of covering, of making excuses for him to others and to myself. This was a line, drawn in the concrete dust of this garage. On one side was the mother who forgives everything. On the other was a woman who still owns what is hers. The decision formed not as a surge of emotion, but as a simple, irrevocable conclusion. I looked up at Frank. I want you to call the police, please. Report the vehicle as stolen. I will speak to them. Frank's eyes widened slightly, but he saw the resolution in my face. He saw the end of discussion. He nodded once, a businessman accepting a difficult but necessary instruction. He turned and picked up the phone on his desk. While he dialed, I stared at my car. The ticking noise was a wheel bearing. The greater noise, the deafening silence of betrayal, was something else entirely. I did not yet feel the hurt. That would come later in the quiet of my home. All I felt in that moment was a concrete certainty, cold and solid as a plinth. This stops here. Today, I let Frank explain the situation to the dispatcher. I gave him my full name and address to relay. I waited. I prepared my statement. I folded my hands back over my purse. The clock continued its loud, indifferent tick, marking the first minute of the end of things as they had been. The police cruiser pulled into the lot just as Frank was hanging up the phone. I watched through the office window as a female officer stepped out, adjusting her utility belt. She was in her 40s, with a no-nonsense posture and dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She surveyed the garage with a practiced eye before walking toward the service entrance. Frank met her at the door. "Officer Rivera," he said, his voice still carrying that strained tone. "Thank you for coming. It's in here." Officer Rivera entered the cluttered office. Her eyes moved from Frank's anxious face to me, sitting straight-backed in the plastic chair. She gave a short, professional nod. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Maria Rivera. I understand there's a situation with a vehicle." I stood up, my knees held. "There is. My name is Ella Johnson. That blue sedan on the lift in Bay 1 is my car. I brought it in for service this morning. Mr. Frank here discovered during the service that my son, Marcus Johnson, fraudulently sold it approximately 1 hour ago." I presented the facts in that order: ownership, location, crime, perpetrator. I kept my voice level. Officer Rivera listened without interruption, her expression neutral. She pulled a small notebook from her chest pocket. "You have proof of ownership, Mrs. Johnson." "Yes." I opened my purse, a large, practical leather bag. From the inner zippered compartment, I retrieved the vehicle registration and my driver's license. I handed them to her. "The title is also in my name, though the physical document appears to have been taken from my home." Rivera compared the information on the registration to my license, then looked at Frank. "You processed the sale." Frank rubbed the back of his neck. "I did. I shouldn't have. Marcus came in, said his mother was selling the car, had the title and keys. I've known the family for years. I didn't think to question it. Not until she brought the same car in for service and I ran the VIN for a part. The system showed the pending transfer to a Kyle Darnell." "Do you have a copy of the transfer paperwork?" Frank turned to his printer, pulled a sheet from the tray, and handed it to her. "It's filed electronically with the DMV, but that's the hard copy. Marcus signed as seller." Rivera studied the document. Her eyes flicked to the signature. "And the son, Marcus Johnson, he is how old?" 32, I answered. "And he does not live with you?" "He has his own apartment. He has not lived with me since he was 21. I felt it was important to establish that separateness, that he was an adult operating independently in the world. Officer Rivera made notes. The squawk of her shoulder radio was a sudden, harsh burst of static and coded language. She tilted her head slightly to listen, then spoke into the microphone clipped to her collar, her voice crisp. Unit 7, I'm 10-7 at Frank's Auto on Main. Code needed. Stand by. She returned her attention to us. So, to be clear, the vehicle was never out of your possession, Mrs. Johnson. You did not at any time sign the title or give permission for this sale. It was in my driveway last night. I drove it here this morning at 9:15. I have not signed anything. I was unaware my son even had the physical title. I keep important documents in a filing cabinet in my home office. And the keys. I have my set. I took them from my purse. He must have used the spare set. They hang on a hook by the back door. He knows where they are. Rivera nodded, closing her notebook with a definitive snap. Based on the evidence presented, your valid registration, the mechanic's testimony and documentation, and your statement, this constitutes grand theft auto. Your son fraudulently transferred ownership of property he did not own. The fact that he used a spare key he had access to does not negate the crime. It was not his to sell. A final legal confirmation. The words grand theft auto hung in the oily air. They were no longer my private shock. They were now a matter of public record, of police paperwork. Frank let out a slow breath, as if he'd been holding it. What happens now? I asked. The vehicle is recovered. It remains in your possession, Rivera said, gesturing toward the bay. The fraudulent sale is void. We will attempt to locate Marcus Johnson for questioning. We will also need to contact the listed buyer, this Kyle Darnell, to inform him the sale is illegitimate and he is not to take possession. He will need to seek restitution from the seller, not you. She looked at me directly. Her eyes were brown and held a certain weary understanding. Mrs. Johnson, pressing charges is your decision, but based on what I see, a crime has been committed. My report will reflect that. If we proceed, it will be up to the district attorney, but your cooperation is necessary. I considered the word cooperation asterisk. It meant standing by what I had just set in motion. It meant seeing this through to a courtroom if it came to that. It meant defining my son, to the state, as a criminal. I will cooperate, I said. The cold clarity had not left me. It was my guide. What do you need from me? I need a formal statement. We can do it here, or you can come down to the precinct. It's quieter there. Her tone suggested the precinct was the better option, away from the listening ears of mechanics and potential customers. The precinct, please. All right, I can give you a ride, or you can meet me there. I will take my car, I said. I looked at Frank. The wheel bearing. I'll get Jimmy on it right now. It'll be ready by the time you get back from the station, Frank said, eager for a concrete, mechanical task he could complete without moral complication. Thank you, Frank. Officer Rivera handed me back my documents. I'll head over now. Ask for me at the front desk. We'll get this documented. She left the office with the same efficient stride. I watched her cruiser pull away. Frank and I stood in the sudden silence of the room, the tension slightly deflated but replaced by a heavier, more permanent weight. I'm sorry, Ella, Frank said again, his voice low. I should have called you first. You had no reason to doubt him, I said. It was not forgiveness, merely a factual assessment. Marcus had exploited a lifetime of assumed trust. That was his method. I placed my registration back into my purse, aligned neatly with my checkbook and a folded handkerchief. I will be back for the car. I walked out of the office, through the garage bay. My car was still suspended in the air. A younger mechanic, Jimmy, was already rolling a tool chest toward it. I did not look up at the undercarriage. I walked out into the late morning sun toward the bus stop on the corner. I would take the number 14 bus to the precinct. It ran every 30 minutes. I had the time. Sitting on the hard plastic bench at the bus stop, I felt the first fissure in the ice. Not sadness, not yet. It was a profound fatigue. The kind that comes after holding a heavy object for too long, when you finally set it down and your muscles tremble with the sudden absence of strain. I had been holding the idea of my son, the good, promising boy he was meant to be, for a very long time. I had just handed that idea, piece by damning piece, to Officer Maria Rivera. The relief was terrible, and it was only the beginning. The silence in my house had a different quality that afternoon. It was not the peaceful quiet of solitude I was accustomed to, but a thick, waiting silence. I had taken the bus back from the precinct, my purse containing a copy of the preliminary police report. Officer Rivera had been efficient. My statement was clear. They would attempt to contact Marcus at his apartment and on his cell phone. They would also contact Kyle Darnell. I had given them Frank's paperwork with the buyer's information. The process was in motion. There was nothing for me to do but wait. I made a pot of tea. I used the ceramic pot Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary, a simple blue glaze. The ritual of boiling water, measuring leaves, letting it steep, was a mechanical comfort. I carried the cup and saucer into the living room but did not sit in my usual chair by the window. Instead, I stood in the center of the room. My eyes traveled the walls, photographs. There was Marcus at 8, missing 2 front teeth, holding up a spelling bee certificate. At 15 in a basketball jersey, his arms slung around his father's shoulder, both of them smiling into a sun I could no longer feel. At 22 in his cap and gown, his expression bright with a future that seemed guaranteed. I had arranged these images in a chronological line, a story of progress. Now they felt like artifacts from a different family's history. The most recent photo was from 3 Christmases ago. He was already looking thinner then, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The troubles had started not long after Robert's passing. A lost job here, a bad investment there. Always a story that sounded plausible enough in the moment, a temporary setback requiring a loan. I had provided those loans from my savings, from my monthly pension stipend. I had told myself I was bridging a gap. I was keeping him from worse choices. I was his mother. The arguments with Robert surfaced in my memory. Robert had seen it earlier, been harder. "He's playing on your heart, Ella," he'd say, his voice firm with a frustration I refused to share. "That boy needs to hit the ground on his own before he'll learn to stand up." I would defend Marcus. I would cite his potential, his rough patch, the unfairness of the world. Robert would sigh and drop the subject, but the worry never left his eyes. After Robert was gone, the requests became more frequent. The amounts grew larger. The repayment promises grew vaguer. There was the $2,000 for back rent to avoid eviction, the $1,500 for a sure-thing investment opportunity with a friend, the $500 for a car repair that never seemed to happen. Each time, the same pattern: urgency, a convincing performance of shame and promise, my relief at being able to help, then the slow fade into silence until the next crisis. I had stopped mentioning it to my sister, Cheryl. I could hear the disapproval in her voice when I simply said things were fine. She knew. The community is small. People talk. They had seen Marcus's nice car come and go, seen the new electronics, and they had also seen him unemployed. They could do the math. My pride had become part of the currency I paid, a supplement to the draining bank account. I walked to the front window and pulled the lace curtain aside. The empty space in the driveway where my car should have been was a stark rectangle of bare concrete. Frank had called just as I was leaving the precinct. The wheel bearing was replaced. The car was ready. He asked, hesitantly, if I wanted him to have someone drive it over. I told him no. I would pick it up tomorrow. I needed it to stay there for now. I did not explain why, but I think he understood. The car was evidence in a way. Its absence here was a physical representation of the violation. I needed to feel that absence for a while longer. My cell phone lay silent on the kitchen table. I expected it to ring. I expected Marcus's number to appear, his voice a torrent of explanations, excuses, manipulations. He would have been contacted by the police by now, or Kyle would have called him, furious about the canceled sale. The waiting was for his response. But as the afternoon light began to soften into evening, the phone did not ring. This silence from him was a new tactic, or perhaps it was paralysis. I realized I was braced for the storm of his justification, but his silence was more disquieting. It forced me to sit alone with my own thoughts without the distraction of his drama. I ate a piece of toast for dinner. I washed the plate and the teacup. I turned on the television for the evening news but muted the sound. The images flickered without meaning. A cold resolve, first formed in Frank's garage and tempered at the police precinct, began to crystallize into something unbreakable. This was not about the money. though the financial loss was significant. This was about the final, absolute crossing of a line. He had not just taken money, he had attempted to dispose of a cornerstone of my independence, to liquidate a piece of my life without a second thought. He had done it with paperwork and a signature, a cold, administrative betrayal. If I withdrew now, if I called Officer Rivera and said it was a misunderstanding, if I accepted another of his tearful apologies, I would be signing a different kind of document. I would be consenting to my own diminishment. I would be telling him and myself that my dignity was negotiable, that my possessions were community property for his whims, that a mother's love meant having no boundaries at all. Robert's words came back not as a reprimand but as a validation. He needs to hit the ground. I had always been there to catch him. This time I had to step aside. The law, for once, was on my side. It was a clear, unambiguous framework. He had committed a felony. My role was not to protect him from that fact, but to acknowledge it. I walked to the filing cabinet in my home office, the one he had rifled through to find the title. I opened the drawer labeled personal. I looked at the neat folders, birth certificates, marriage license, death certificate, property deed. I found the folder labeled automobile. Inside was the empty sleeve where the title had been. I did not touch it. I simply observed the emptiness. Then I closed the drawer. I locked it with a small key I kept on my own key ring. It was a symbolic gesture. The real lock that had been broken was not physical. I returned to the living room and sat finally in my chair. The silent television cast a blue glow over the photographs. I waited, not for the phone to ring, but for the next step in the process I had initiated. My hands were steady in my lap. The trembling fatigue from the bus stop was gone, replaced by a sort of grim patience. I had thrown the stone. I would not run to retrieve it before it landed. I would watch its trajectory. I would accept the splash. The call came at 10:17 the next morning. I was sorting laundry, a basket of whites on the kitchen table. The mundane task was a necessary anchor. When my phone buzzed, I saw it was the precinct's general number, not Officer Rivera's direct line. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Rivera. We've located your vehicle and the involved parties." My hands stilled on a folded towel. "Where?" "The Supermart parking lot on Elm. It appears your son and the buyer, Kyle Darnell, are meeting to complete the handoff. We have a unit monitoring. I can be there in 5 minutes. I need you to come to officially identify your property and confirm the situation." "I don't have my car," I said, the practical problem surfacing immediately. "I'll send a squad car to pick you up. Will you be ready?" "Yes." I placed the towel back in the basket. "I will be outside." I changed from my house slippers to my walking shoes. I put on a light jacket. I checked my purse for my ID and the copy of the police report. I did not look in the mirror. I waited on the front porch. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Laney, was watering her azaleas. She waved. I lifted a hand in return, my face composed. The marked police car pulled up to my curb 2 minutes later. I saw Mrs. Laney's watering can pause midair. A young officer got out and opened the rear passenger door for me. "Mrs. Johnson, Officer Rivera requested I bring you to the Supermart." "Thank you," I said. I got in. The interior smelled of sanitizer and vinyl. The barrier between the front and back seats was a clear, heavy plastic. I looked straight ahead as we drove. I did not glance at Mrs. Laney. The officer did not speak. The radio chattered with codes I did not understand. The Supermart parking lot was vast, a sea of asphalt dotted with cars under the flat midday sun. The officer drove toward the far corner, near the garden center. I saw Officer Rivera's unmarked sedan first, parked at an angle. Then I saw my blue sedan, and beside it Marcus's silver coupe. 2 figures were standing between the vehicles. As we pulled up, the details sharpened. Marcus was facing a younger man in a bright red athletic jacket, Kyle. Marcus was talking rapidly, his hands moving in exaggerated explanation. Kyle's posture was rigid, arms crossed. He was shaking his head. Our squad car stopped beside Officer Rivera's. She got out and approached my door. The young officer opened it for me. The sounds of the parking lot flooded in, distant cartwheels, traffic from the street, the low hum of commerce. "Ready?" Officer Rivera asked. Her voice was calm, professional. I am. I stepped out. We walked the 20 feet toward the two cars. Marcus, seeing the movement from the corner of his eye, turned. His expression shifted from strained persuasion to pure, unguarded shock. His face lost all its color. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked from me to Officer Rivera to the marked squad car. His entire body seemed to freeze. Kyle turned next. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice loud with annoyance. "You said this was clean, man. Who are these people?" Officer Rivera spoke first, her authority settling over the scene like a net. "Kyle Darnell?" she asked, though it was clear she knew. "Yeah, what's going on?" "I'm Officer Rivera. This is Ella Johnson, the legal owner of this vehicle." She gestured to my sedan. "The sale conducted by Marcus Johnson is fraudulent. The title he presented was stolen. This vehicle was reported stolen yesterday. You are not to take possession." Kyle's face flushed with anger. He spun toward Marcus. "You said it was your mom's car and she wanted you to sell it. You said it was paid off. I have $3,500 in cash in my pocket for you." Marcus flinched as if struck. He found his voice, but it was a thin, desperate thing. "Mom, officer, this is a huge misunderstanding." His eyes pleaded with me, a look I knew well. It was the look that preceded a story, a reason, a justification designed to soften me. I said nothing. I simply looked at him, waiting. Let him speak to the air he had poisoned. Officer Rivera addressed Kyle. "Mr. Darnell, you are the victim of a fraud. The sale is void. Any financial transaction is between you and Mr. Johnson. I suggest you secure your money. You have no legal claim to this automobile." "So I'm just out $3,500, Kyle shouted, gesturing wildly at Marcus. "He's got to give it back." "That is a civil matter," Rivera said, unmoved by his volume. "You can pursue that in small claims court, but you will not drive that car away today." Kyle swore viciously, shoving his hands into the pockets of his jacket. He took a step toward Marcus. "Give me my money back, right now." Marcus took a step back, hitting the side of my car. He looked trapped, his eyes darting between Kyle's rage, the officer's impassive face, and my silence. I don't have it on me. It's in the bank. I can get it." "You're a liar," Kyle spat. "Marcus Johnson," Officer Rivera interjected, her tone shifting to an official cadence. "You are under investigation for grand theft auto. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As she recited the Miranda rights, Marcus's gaze locked onto mine. The shock was melting into a dawning, horrible comprehension. This was not a private family dispute he could talk his way out of. This was the law. The words grand theft auto were not just a phrase on a report. They were being spoken directly to him, under the open sky, in a public parking lot. His shoulders slumped. The charming facade crumbled completely, revealing the raw panic beneath. He mouthed one word at me, "Mom." I did not respond. I turned my attention to Officer Rivera. "This is my vehicle," I confirmed, my voice clear in the space between the cars. "I did not authorize any sale. I want it back." "It is your vehicle, Mrs. Johnson," Rivera affirmed, finishing the rights. She then looked at Marcus. "We can do this here, or we can go to the precinct, but you are coming with me to answer questions." The sun was high and bright. A shopping cart rattled in the distance. In that ordinary lot, my son's life was pivoting on an axis of his own making. I watched him. I felt no triumph, only a stark, unflinching clarity. He had brought us here, to this asphalt under this sun, with a stranger shouting about stolen cash. This was the ground Robert said he needed to hit. He was hitting it now. I did not look away. Officer Rivera's words, "You have the right to remain silent," seemed to hang in the air, a formal barrier between my son and the world he thought he could manipulate. Kyle Darnell broke the moment first, his frustration boiling over. "So what, he gets arrested and I'm just screwed. He has my money." Officer Rivera turned her head a fraction toward him, her patience visibly thinning. "Mr. Darnell, as I stated, your financial dispute is civil. You can file a report for fraud if you wish, but you standing here yelling is not aiding this investigation. I suggest you leave the premises now, or I will have you escorted for interfering." "This is bull," Kyle spat, but he took a step back, his hands raised in angry surrender. He shot a final, venomous look at Marcus. "You're dead, man, you hear me? I want my cash." He turned and stalked off across the parking lot, his red jacket a blot of fatting anger. That left the three of us. Marcus looked utterly alone. The bravado, the excuses, the charming pleas, all the tools in his arsenal were useless against the reality of the handcuffs Officer Rivera now produced from her belt. The metallic click as she secured his wrists behind his back was a small, sharp sound. He stared at the ground, his shoulders hunched. "Mom," he said again, his voice choked. "Please, you don't have to do this. I can fix it. I'll get Kyle his money back. I made a mistake." I had waited for this, for the performance. I took a step closer, not to comfort, but to ensure he heard me clearly. I spoke with a calm that felt alien even to me, each word measured and cold. "Marcus, look at me." He dragged his gaze up from the asphalt. His eyes were wide, swimming with a fear I had never seen in him before. It was not the fear of a child, but of a man facing a cliff. "There is no misunderstanding," I stated. "You went into my house. You took a document you had no right to touch. You took keys you had no right to use. You lied to a man who trusted you. You attempted to sell my car. My car, the one with my name on the title. Not yours, mine." He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I continued, my voice cutting through his unformed words. "This is not a loan you forgot to pay back. This is not a bad decision you need help smoothing over. This is a crime. You committed a crime against me. Do you understand the difference?" He flinched. I was desperate. I owe people, bad people. I didn't know what else to do. "There are always other choices," I said, unmoved by the mention of bad people. A detail I suspected was embellished for effect. "You could have come to me. You could have asked for help. Again, but you didn't. You chose theft. You chose to treat something that is a part of my life, of my freedom, as a quick solution to a problem of your own making." Officer Rivera stood silently, allowing the familial confrontation to play out, but her presence was a constant reminder of the larger context. This was not just a scolding. I gestured to my car, then back to him. "This is the consequence of that choice. You do not get to talk your way out of it this time. The talking is done. Now there are procedures, there are laws." Marcus's head dropped again. A shudder went through him. It might have been a sob, but I saw no tears. It was the physical tremor of a system in collapse, the collapse of the world where his actions had no real weight. Officer Rivera spoke. "Mrs. Johnson is correct, Mr. Johnson. You are facing a felony charge. The district attorney will decide how to proceed based on the evidence. Your cooperation now may be a factor." She guided him toward her sedan. "We are going to the precinct. Mrs. Johnson, you will follow in your vehicle. You have your keys." I realized she was holding out my key fob. She must have retrieved it from Marcus's pocket. I took it. The familiar weight in my hand felt significant. "Yes, I will follow you." She placed Marcus in the back of her car. He did not look at me again. I walked to my sedan. The driver's side door was unlocked. I got in. The interior smelled exactly as it always had, of the lemon-scented cleaner I used and the faint, lingering aroma of the peppermint candies I kept in the console. Nothing was out of place. He had not even had time to clean out his mother's belongings before selling it. I started the engine. The new wheel bearing was silent. The car ran smoothly. In the rearview mirror, I saw Officer Rivera's sedan pull out, Marcus a dim shape behind the glass. I put my car in drive and followed. The short drive to the precinct was eerily quiet. My hands were steady on the wheel. The cold clarity had not left me, but it was now mixed with a profound weariness. The confrontation was over. The truth had been stated plainly in a public lot with legal authority as a witness. I had reclaimed my property. I had named the crime. The power had shifted irrevocably. But as I parked beside the precinct and watched Officer Rivera lead my handcuffed son through the rear doors, I felt no victory. I felt the heavy certainty of a door closing. The mother who would endlessly forgive, who would protect and explain and enable, was the one being led away in cuffs. The woman who remained, who got out of her car and walked toward the building, was someone new. She was someone who required accountability. She was someone who believed that love, real love, sometimes had to stand back and let the ground rise up to meet the falling. I did not know if I liked this new woman, but I knew she was necessary. I followed them inside. The fluorescent lights in the precinct interview room were harsh and unflattering, casting a sickly glow over the scuffed table. I sat on one side, Officer Rivera on the other. She had placed a cup of water in front of me. I had not touched it. Marcus was in a separate room, being processed and waiting for a public defender. The procedural machinery was in motion, a series of clicks and whirs that felt both impersonal and immense. "The charges are straightforward, Mrs. Johnson," Officer Rivera said, her notebook open. "Grand theft auto, fraud. The DA will see the evidence. It's a solid case." "What happens now?" I asked. My voice sounded thin in the sterile space. "He'll be arraigned. That's a court appearance where he's formally charged. Bail might be set. Given the circumstances and no prior violent record, he'll likely be released on his own recognizance or with a bail amount until trial. But that's not my call." She paused, studying me. "As the victim, you have options. You can advocate for the maximum prosecution. You can also choose to seek a restorative justice path if the DA is amenable. That often involves restitution, repaying the value of the loss, and possibly some form of counseling or community service in lieu of jail time. It depends on what you want the outcome to be." I looked at my hands, folded on the table. "What about the buyer, Kyle Darnell?" "I spoke with him briefly on the phone. He's furious, but he understands Marcus is the one who defrauded him. I advised him on the small claims court process. He's not pressing separate charges at this time. His issue is with Marcus, not with you or the police." That was one less complication. The problem was contained within our family, even if the family was now sitting in separate, brightly lit boxes in a police station. "What does restitution mean exactly?" I asked. "It means he would be legally obligated to repay you the fair market value of the vehicle he attempted to steal. Given that the car is recovered, the monetary loss is technically zero. But the court could consider the repair costs you incurred, any other expenses. More symbolically, it's an admission of financial harm. It gets noted on his record, but it can sometimes be part of a plea deal that avoids a felony conviction, depending on the DA. "A felony conviction," I repeated. The words had a permanent, scarring quality. "It would follow him. Employment, housing, loans. It has lifelong consequences." I fell silent. This was the weight I had sensed in the parking lot, the true gravity of the stone I had thrown. I had wanted him to face the consequence, to hit the ground. But did I want the ground to permanently swallow him? The anger, cold and sharp, said yes. It wanted to brand him, to make the invisible injury of betrayal visible to the world. But the mother, the part that still remembered the spelling bee champion, hesitated. Officer Rivera watched my internal debate without pressing. She was good at her job. "If I choose the restitution path," I said slowly, "it is not forgiveness." "I understand. It is a choice of consequence. A financial and legal consequence rather than a purely punitive one. He would have to pay. He would have a record but not a felony. He would have to work to repay a debt he created. Is that a possibility?" "It can be proposed. The DA has the final say. But your preference as the victim carries significant weight. If you are seeking a restorative outcome rather than a strictly punitive one, they will listen." I nodded. It felt like a strategic decision, a choice between two forms of justice. One was about punishment, about making him suffer as I had suffered. The other was about repair, about forcing him to actively fix what he had broken, even if the trust could never be fully mended. The second felt harder for him. Writing a check to the state was passive. Writing a series of checks to me, month after month, would be an active, ongoing reminder. "I want him to be held accountable," I said, my voice firming. "I want the law to confirm that what he did was a crime, but I want the accountability to be in the form of restitution. He needs to pay back every cent he has ever taken from me, not just for the car, but for all of it. The loans, the emergencies, all of it. I have records." Officer Rivera made a note. You can submit that as part of a victim impact statement. It can be included in the restitution order. It would be a civil judgment, enforceable by the court. That is what I want, I said. The decision settled into place. It was not mercy, not as he would understand it. It was a different kind of sentence, one that required labor and time and constant confrontation with his own failure. All right, Rivera said. I'll note your preference in my report and speak with the DA's office. He'll likely be released later today with a court date. You should avoid contact with him until then. It's cleaner. I stood up. The plastic chair scraped against the linoleum. Thank you, officer. She stood as well. You did a hard thing, Mrs. Johnson. A lot of people wouldn't have. I didn't know if she meant calling the police or choosing restitution. Perhaps both. I simply nodded and left the interview room. The walk through the precinct lobby felt longer than the walk in. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped back into the afternoon. My car was parked where I'd left it. For a moment, I just looked at it. It was mine again, legally, physically. I had the key in my hand. I had a path forward, a course of action that felt like justice, not vengeance. But as I drove away from the precinct, the calculated coldness began to recede, and in its wake, a hollow space opened up. I had one. I had my car. I had a plan for accountability. The system was working as I had asked. Now I had to go home to the silence and live with what I had set in motion. The revenge, it turned out, was not in the confrontation or the arrest. It was in the quiet that came after, when you are left alone with the consequences of your own necessary, terrible strength. The drive home from the precinct was automatic. My hands turned the wheel. My foot operated the pedals. My eyes registered traffic lights and street signs, but my mind was a blank, static-filled screen. The car, now quiet and repaired, felt like a shell. I had fought for it, reclaimed it, but sitting inside it gave me no satisfaction. It was just a machine again, separated from the meaning I had attached to it. I pulled into the driveway. The concrete space that had felt so accusingly empty yesterday now contained the very object of the conflict. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. I sat there for several minutes, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I watched the late afternoon sun cast long shadows from the maple tree in the front yard. It was a peaceful scene. It felt like a lie. I went inside. The house greeted me with its familiar smells, lemony polish, the faint scent of last night's toast. It was clean, orderly, silent. I placed my purse on the hall table, hung my jacket in the closet. These were the motions of a normal day. They felt absurd. I walked into the living room. The photographs on the wall seemed to accuse me now from the other side. The smiling boy, the proud graduate. I had not just caught my son in a crime. I had dismantled the story those pictures told. I had exposed the narrative of our family as incomplete, a curated exhibit missing its darkest pieces. The mother in those photos, the one beaming with pride, would never have called the police on her child. That mother was gone. I had erased her today. I made dinner because it was time to make dinner. A simple chicken breast, some frozen vegetables. I ate at the kitchen table, alone. The click of my fork against the plate was loud in the quiet. I tried to watch the evening news, but the images of distant tragedies felt trivial compared to the intimate catastrophe in my own home. The phone did not ring. This was what I had told Officer Rivera I wanted no contact. But the silence from Marcus was a palpable thing. It wasn't the silence of defiance or anger. It was the silence of a void. For years, his presence in my life, however problematic, had been a constant. Calls for help, visits for meals, texts with excuses. That hum of connection, even when it was stressful, was a thread. Today, I had taken scissors and cut it. The absence of that low-grade anxiety left behind a vacuum, a nothingness that was somehow heavier. I thought about him in a holding cell. Was he scared? Was he angry at me? Was he finally, truly ashamed? I did not know. I realized I had no idea what my son was actually feeling, because for years I had accepted the surface emotions he presented, the performative regret, the manufactured crises. The real man beneath those performances was a stranger to me. This was the cost. The revenge, the justice, the standing up for myself. It came with a receipt, and the total was this crushing loneliness. I had traded the son I had, the flawed and draining son, for no son at all. I had chosen dignity over devotion, and now I had to live in the empty palace of that dignity. I washed my single plate, my single glass, my single set of utensils. I dried them and put them away. The routine was a cage of normality. Later, in the dark of my bedroom, the true grief arrived. It did not come with tears, but with a physical weight on my chest, a tightness that made breathing conscious labor. I mourned the child I had raised, the man he should have become. I mourned the future I had imagined, grandchildren, family holidays, a son who would care for me in my old age. That future was now gone, incinerated in the supermart parking lot. What remained was a bleak, uncharted landscape of court dates and restitution payments and awkward, strained encounters, if there were any encounters at all. I had wanted him to face consequences. Now I was facing my own. The consequence was this hollow victory. The consequence was understanding that doing the right thing, the strong thing, could feel exactly like a profound and irreversible loss. I thought of Robert. I wished, with a sharpness that surprised me, that he were here. Not to say, "I told you so," but to share this burden. To sit in this silence with me. To be the other parent who understood the cost of loving a child who breaks your heart. His absence felt deeper than ever. The night stretched on. I did not sleep. I watched the digital numbers on my bedside clock change. 11, 47, 123, 3, 16. Each minute was a grain of sand falling in an hourglass that seemed to measure a new, emptier kind of time. When the first gray light of dawn began to seep around the edges of the blinds, I got up. I made my bed with tight hospital corners. I dressed in clean clothes. I went downstairs and started another pot of coffee. The actions were the same as every other morning, but they were performed by a different woman. This woman had a police report number. This woman had a son with a court date. This woman had won a battle and now inhabited a peace that felt no different from surrender. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee. The car was in the driveway. My name was on the title. The law was on my side. And the house, my sanctuary, felt like the quietest, most lonely place on earth. The knock at the front door came just after 10 o'clock. The sound was solid, respectful, not the frantic tapping Marcus would use. I was in the living room, attempting to read a magazine. The words had been swimming on the page for an hour. I placed the magazine on the side table and went to answer. Through the narrow glass panel beside the door, I saw Frank. He stood on my porch, his hands in the pockets of his clean, dark blue work pants. He held his body in a neutral, patient stance. I opened the door. "Frank." "Ella, morning." He gave a small nod. "I have your car. Finished it yesterday, but I figured you might want it brought home." I looked past him. My blue sedan was parked neatly at the curb behind his pickup truck. It looked clean, even the wheels seemed to have been rinsed. "You didn't have to do that. I could have come to get it." "I know," he said. "It was no trouble, wanted to make sure everything was running right for you." He paused, then added, "And I wanted to talk to you for a minute, if you have the time." I stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in." He wiped his boots carefully on the mat before entering. I led him to the living room. He didn't sit, just stood near the armchair, looking uncomfortable but purposeful. "Would you like some coffee, Frank?" "No, thank you, I won't stay long." He looked around the room, his gaze touching on the photographs, then returning to me. "First, the car, the wheel bearings fixed. No charge for that, of course. I checked everything else. Tires are good. Fluids are good. It's a solid car, should give you no problems." "Thank you," I said. His refusal of payment was an apology, one I accepted without comment. He cleared his throat, his eyes on the floor for a moment before meeting mine. "The other thing is, people know, Ella, about what happened. Small town." I had expected this. I nodded. I assumed they would. "It's not gossip, not the bad kind." He struggled for the right words. "Kyle Darnell's mother is in my wife's book club. He came home yelling about getting swindled. The story got around. Then, seeing the police at your house yesterday, people put it together." I remained silent, letting him continue. "What I'm trying to say is, the way you handled it, people are talking about that too. They're not talking about Marcus, not really. They're talking about you. My wife said the women at book club were saying, Ella Johnson finally drew a line. They said it with respect. He shifted his weight. The guy at the hardware store, old Mr. Peters, he saw the police car here yesterday. He stopped me this morning and said, "You tell Ella we're proud of her." That's the word he used. Proud. I felt a strange sensation, a slight loosening of the tightness in my chest. It wasn't approval I had sought, but the absence of judgment, the absence of pity, was a form of oxygen. "I didn't do it for them," I said quietly. "I know that, they know that too, that's why they're saying it." He looked directly at me. "For a long time, people have seen the struggle. They've seen him take advantage. They've felt sorry for you. Not in a mean way, but now they don't feel sorry. They feel impressed." The word hung in the air. Impressed. It was not a word I associated with my life. "I was part of the problem," Frank said, his voice growing firmer. "I should have called you. I won't make that mistake again. But seeing you walk in here so calm and then doing what you had to do, it made me think. It made a lot of folks think." He was delivering more than the car. He was delivering a message from the community I had lived in for 40 years, a message of solidarity. It did not fix anything, but it changed the atmosphere around the fixed thing. I was not a foolish old woman to be pitied. I was a person who had enforced a boundary. In their eyes, that commanded respect. "Thank you for telling me, Frank." "You're welcome." He seemed relieved to have said his piece. He gestured toward the door. "The keys are in it, it's all yours." I walked him to the door. On the porch, he paused. "If you need anything at all with the car, you call me directly, day or night." "I will, thank you." He nodded once more, a gesture of deep respect, and walked to his truck. I stood in the doorway and watched him drive away. Then I looked at my car. It was just a car again, but its presence at the curb, returned by the man who had unintentionally facilitated its theft, felt significant. It was no longer just a symbol of loss or betrayal. It was a returned object, repaired, and its return had been witnessed. I walked down the steps and to the curb. I opened the driver's door. The interior was spotless. He had even vacuumed the floors. The key was in the ignition. I got in and started it. The engine purred, smooth and silent. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel. Then I backed out of the spot and pulled it into my driveway, into its proper place. The rectangle of concrete was filled. The visual order of my home was restored. As I turned off the engine, I thought about Frank's words. Proud, impressed. They were not emotions I could feel for myself, not yet. But knowing that my actions were seen not as a mother's failure, but as a person's strength, altered the quality of the silence in the house. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a stand that had been recognized. It was a small, external validation, and in the hollow aftermath of my victory, it was a brick I could use to start rebuilding something. Not a relationship, but a reputation. My own. 3 days after Frank's visit, the letter arrived. It came in the afternoon mail, a standard white envelope with my address handwritten in black ink. The handwriting was Marcus, but it was different. The usual loose, confident scrawl was gone. These letters were smaller, more carefully formed, as if each one required concentrated effort. The return address was the County Detention Center. There was no name, just the institutional address. I carried the envelope inside along with a grocery store flyer and a bill. I placed it on the kitchen table. I put away the groceries I had bought. I washed my hands. I made a cup of tea. I performed all these actions with a deliberate slowness, observing the envelope as one might observe a sleeping animal, unsure if it was harmless. Finally, I sat down. I used a butter knife from the drawer to slit the envelope open neatly. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the kind from a cheap notepad. It was filled on both sides with the same careful, cramped handwriting. I began to read. Mom asterisk. I'm writing this from a cell. They gave me paper and a pencil. I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. I am not writing to make excuses. There are no excuses for what I did. I am writing because I need to say some things, and I can't say them to your face. I don't have the right to look at you. What I did to you was the worst thing I have ever done. I knew it was wrong when I did it. I knew it was stealing. I told myself it was just a car, that you could get another one, that I would pay you back somehow. But those were lies I told myself so I could sleep at night. I wasn't sleeping anyway. I have been lying to you for years, not just about money. I have been lying about who I am. I am not the person you see or the person I pretend to be. I am someone who is constantly afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of being ordinary, afraid of being like everyone else who just works and pays bills. That fear makes me do stupid, desperate things. Then I feel ashamed, and the shame makes me need to pretend I'm not a failure, which costs more money I don't have. It's a circle. I have been running in that circle since Dad died. I thought his death meant I had to be something huge, something to make up for the loss. Instead, I became nothing, less than nothing, a thief who steals from his own mother. When you walked into that parking lot with the police, I wanted the ground to swallow me. Not because I was caught, but because I saw your face. You didn't look angry. You looked clear. You saw exactly what I was. And you let the law see it too. That was the moment I realized I had hurt you in a way that couldn't be fixed with a sorry. I am so sorry, Mom. The words are useless, but they are true. I am ashamed. I am disgusted with myself. I don't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know that I know what I did. I know it was a crime. I know it was a betrayal. I know I broke your trust, and maybe I broke us. The public defender says you asked for restitution instead of jail. Thank you for that. It is more than I deserve. I will pay you back every penny. I don't know how yet, but I will. It will be the first real thing I've done in a long time. I don't expect you to write back. I just needed to put this on paper. Marcus. I read the letter once. Then I read it again, more slowly. My eyes traced the shapes of the letters, the pressure of the pencil on the page. I looked for manipulation, for the subtle hooks of guilt he had used so effectively in the past. I found none. There were no if-only statements. No blame shifted to friends, to the economy, to bad luck. There was no request for forgiveness. There was only a stark, ugly self-assessment. The line about his father's death struck me. It was an explanation, not an excuse. I had never considered that. I had been so busy grieving my husband, I hadn't seen how our son was drowning in that same loss, trying to inflate himself into a giant to fill the empty space. He had chosen a destructive path, but for the first time, I saw a glimmer of the confused pain that might have started him on it. I did not cry. I felt a strange, heavy stillness. The cold anger that had sustained me for days had nowhere to go. It met no resistance in this letter. He had conceded every point. He had accepted every label. My revenge had been to force him to see himself truthfully. According to this page, he did. I placed the letter on the table. I finished my tea, though it had gone cold. The silence in the kitchen was different. It was no longer filled solely with my own hurt and resolution. It now contained his voice, in pencil on lined paper, speaking of shame and acknowledgement. This was not reconciliation. Reconciliation was a distant country we might never reach. This was something more basic, verification. He had verified the reality I had forced into the open. He had confirmed that my harsh judgment was correct. In a perverse way, it was a form of respect. He was not fighting my version of events. He was agreeing with it. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I did not put it in the filing cabinet with the other important documents. I carried it upstairs and placed it in the top drawer of my bedside table. It was not a treasure. It was evidence of a different sort. That night, I did not think about the son I had lost. I thought about the man in the cell, writing those painstaking words, trying to articulate a truth about himself for the first time. My revenge had demanded accountability. This letter was the first installment. It did not heal the wound, but it told me the wound was recognized by the one who inflicted it. That was a start. It was a cold, small, hard start, but it was not nothing. The letter remained in my bedside drawer. I did not take it out and read it again, but I was aware of its presence, a quiet, paperweight in my daily routine. 2 weeks passed. The mechanics of the legal process ground forward. Marcus was released on his own recognizance after his arraignment. The district attorney's office contacted me to confirm my preference for a restitution-based resolution. I affirmed it. They drafted a formal proposal. I was waiting. My life resumed its external pattern. I went to the grocery store. I attended my book club, where the conversation was careful, kind, and did not mention sons or cars. I worked in my garden. The community's respectful silence on the matter was its own form of support, as Frank had indicated. I was Ella Johnson who had handled her business. It was a new, solid identity. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. The number was not programmed in, but I recognized it as Marcus. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello. There was a pause on the other end, then his voice, subdued and lacking its usual performative energy. Mom, it's Marcus. I know. I got the paperwork from the DA about the restitution. I assumed you would. Another pause. I did not fill it. He had called, he could carry the conversation. I've enrolled in the financial management course. It's a condition, but I would have done it anyway. I start next week. He spoke quickly, as if delivering a report. I also got a job. It's at the warehouse for Ferguson's appliances, loading trucks. It's full-time. That is good, I said neutrally. I want to start the payments. To you, as outlined. But I wondered if I could see you, to give you the first payment in person, and to show you the course registration and the job offer letter, so you can see it's real. I considered this. A public meeting with documents and money. It was transactional, it was safe. Where? There's a coffee shop on Elm, the Daily Grind. We could meet there tomorrow afternoon, at 2. I will be there, I said. Thank you. The relief in his voice was palpable. The call ended. The next day, I drove myself to the coffee shop. I parked my car, nodding its reliable silence. I went inside. It was mid-afternoon, mostly empty. I chose a table near the window. I ordered a black coffee. I waited. He arrived exactly at 2. He saw me immediately. He was dressed in clean, simple clothes, khaki pants, and a plain blue polo shirt. Not the expensive, flashy brands he used to favor. His hair was cut short. He looked older. He approached the table, holding a manila envelope. Mom, he said, standing awkwardly. Marcus, I gestured to the chair opposite me. Sit. He sat, placing the envelope on the table between us. He did not try to order a drink. He clasped his hands in front of him. His knuckles were slightly scraped, the marks of new, physical work. How are you? He asked, the polite question sounding strange between us. I am well, and you? I'm okay. The job is hard, but it's honest. He unclasped his hands and opened the envelope. He withdrew several papers. This is the confirmation for the financial course. He slid it across. I glanced at it, saw his name, the dates, the official seal. I nodded. And this is the job offer letter with the salary. Another slide. I looked at the hourly wage, calculated the monthly gross. It was a modest living. It was real. Finally, he took out a bank envelope. It was not thick. This is $200. It's the first payment. According to the restitution schedule, it's supposed to be $180, but I added $20 for the wheel bearing repair. Frank wouldn't take your money, so it should come from me. I took the bank envelope. I did not open it. I placed it next to my coffee cup. Thank you. He looked down at his hands. I have a plan to pay Kyle Darnell back. It'll take longer, but I've spoken to him. He's still angry, but he agreed to a payment plan. Small claims court is on hold for now. That is responsible, I said. He finally looked up at me. His eyes held none of the old charm, only a tired honesty. I don't expect you to trust me. I just want you to know I am doing the things, one at a time. I see that, I said, and I did. The evidence was on the table. We sat in silence for a moment. The gap between us was vast, filled with the wreckage of his actions and my response. There was no easy bridge. I read your letter, I said. He swallowed hard. I meant every word. I know you did. That is why I agreed to this meeting. He nodded, absorbing that. It was not forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement of his acknowledgement. I should let you go, he said after another moment. I wanted you to see it wasn't just talk. I have seen it. I gathered the papers and the money envelope and placed them in my own bag. You may go, Marcus. He stood up. He hesitated as if considering a hug, but the space was too wide. He gave a short, stiff nod instead. I'll call before the next payment to arrange to get it to you. That would be fine. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop. I watched through the window as he got into an older, sensible sedan, a borrowed car, perhaps, or a cheap rental. He drove away. I finished my coffee. I paid the bill. I walked back to my car. The afternoon sun was bright. I got in and started the engine. Instead of turning toward home, I turned onto the highway that led out of town, toward the open countryside. I rolled the windows down. The air was cool and fresh. I drove without a destination. Past fields, past scattered farms, past stands of trees just beginning to show the faintest hint of green. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibility. My hands were steady on the wheel. The car responded perfectly to my touch. The revenge was complete. It had not been fiery or violent. It had been a cold, judicial process that ended with a bank envelope and a stack of paperwork on a coffee shop table. It had carved out a space where accountability could exist. It had left me alone in my car, with the title in my name and the open road before me. I was not happy. Happiness was too simple a word. I was at peace, a hard-won, solitary peace. I had my dignity. I had my independence. I had the faint, fragile possibility of a future where my son might become a man I could respect from a distance. It was not the story I had wanted, but it was the truth I had reclaimed. I pressed the accelerator gently, and the car carried me forward into the light.